Welcome back. We're continuing with the story of Adam and Eve, the situation, the step in human evolution, universal evolution. So let's see what happened really locally with these material sons and daughters that Derek is talking to us about. So let's dive into this segment, which is the Garden of Eden. So, to carry out their mission, Adam and Eve established the legendary Garden of Eden, a center of learning, culture, and spiritual teaching. Designed as a model civilization, the garden introduced agriculture, education, and new forms of social organization intended to gradually uplift the surrounding tribes. For a time, Eden stood as one of the most advanced societies the ancient world had ever seen. So tell us a little bit more of our
All
beloved Garden of
right.
Eden.
Yes, here it is. History.
Yes.
So, picking up where we left off, I guess, with the history is we have, the spread out of the different groups of the Nephilim. And we have especially Van and his people. Van, if everybody remembers, is the leader of the loyal staff, the loyal Anunnaki, who remained loyal and tried to
Mm-hmm.
keep the light of civilization burning for 160,000 years from the outbreak of the rebellion to the point that we're about to start talking about now, which is about 40,000 years ago.
Okay.
So at this point where this apex is realized, the biologic apex and stuff, Van is, upholding civilization as best as he can in his region in Anatolia around Lake Van, where I described. And they made him aware that Adam and Eve were going to be coming. So he knew that Adam and Eve always lived
But
in a garden.
let's
Yes,
can you
sorry.
clarify about Van and I mean a lot of people that are just coming in and tuning in. How can
Yeah.
this person
So
how
Van
old is he?
Van was a member of the physical and visible staff
Mm-hmm.
of the first divine administration, right?
Yeah.
So he was actually we talked about this with the tree of life. By means of
Exactly.
eating the fruit of the tree of life, he was able to maintain immortality, which is
Mm-hmm.
necessary for the type of work that has to be done with these dispensational bestowals, right?
Hence the
And
stories of the gods and the times of the gods that we talked about in our last
that's
podcast.
right.
If you don't know about it, please look it up. Just look for Derek, and he's
The
gonna.
other podcast, yeah,
You
because
can you can
that's
go
super
and because
important.
it's really puts it into perspective, and
Yeah,
really you have to see it and understand where we are in this progression. So
yeah,
please go ahead.
yeah. So this is a part two.
Yes,
so
exactly.
so Van, knowing that Adam and Eve always live in a garden,
Mm-hmm.
um, sent some volunteers out to start looking for suitable locations, and they found like 4 or 5 different locations. But for our purposes, we'll talk about 2 of them. Okay, so the runner-up
Mm-hmm.
location was actually in Mesopotamia again, in a area between the 2 rivers again, where the rivers came actually close enough that they could build a defensive wall, which is
Mm-hmm.
important because there's a lot of, well, belligerent Nephilim around,
Yeah.
and other indigenous tribes as well. Um, so that was the runner-up. But what they actually decided on was what is described as a long, narrow peninsula extending
Okay.
from extending westwards from the then eastern shores of the Mediterranean Ocean, or Mediterranean Sea,
Okay.
sorry. Okay,
Okay. Because
so it's a long.
it wasn't so extensive, the ocean, right? It
That's
wasn't so
something
big.
that I think a
The
lot of people forget when they're trying to look for this place, is that it wasn't actually the Mediterranean Sea at the time. It hadn't
exactly.
been, the Sicilian land bridge hadn't broken yet. So it was just pockmarked inland huge lakes, like the Great Lakes type thing, in
Yeah. Yeah.
Canada. Um, anyway, so this is how it's described. It's a long, narrow peninsula extending westwards from the then eastern shores of the Mediterranean. And so
Mm,
they unanimously decided this is awesome because the peninsula is really defensible.
exactly.
And so what they did was they uprooted from the area in Anatolia, and they all moved down into the peninsula, and they started building in
Okay.
preparation for Adam and Eve coming. So
Okay.
the first thing that they did, and I think it's really because I'm going to be describing the garden now. So what I'd like to encourage everybody to do is just sort of sit back, close your eyes, and try and imagine this because it's pretty epic. So the first thing they did was where the peninsula joins the mainland is they started building a wall. And this wall was 27 miles long when it was
Okay.
finished. Okay. 27 miles long along the whole breadth of the peninsula where it meets the mainland. And
Uh-huh.
along that, there were 12 huge, massive gates where you could enter the
Okay.
garden from. And in front of that wall, they built a smaller wall. So, just picture this, right? It's just incredible when you think about it. Imagine yourself just standing in front of it and just looking at this, right? Um, and so
Imagine how many, I mean, just the massiveness, right?
it's incredible, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and we're not even they haven't even
In it.
started building the stuff in the garden yet, which
Yeah, we're
we're
not
getting
in it
to.
yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in between this smaller wall in the front and the larger defensive wall,
Mm-hmm.
um, they filled it with wild animals. So there's no getting in there, right? Um, like, and the reason that they did that is because society had completely collapsed and they had to defend the peninsula because their primary occupation in the garden was to
It
increase
wasn't
their
because they
population.
didn't want to they didn't want to mingle. It was because it was a
Not
real
yet.
reason. Yeah, it
Not
was
yet.
a real reason behind all
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yes, right? So that's the first thing they did, this incredible wall, and I picture that in my mind a lot, and it's just it takes my breath away every time I think about it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So So they've got this and all the wild animals in between those two gates and everything. And then they start building inside the garden. Okay. So I hope you're still imagining this.
Yeah.
So in the center of the peninsula, they built this exquisite stone temple of the unseen Father, the universal Father. Okay. And that was the center. And in the center of that temple, they replanted the tree of life because Adam and
Okay.
Eve were going to need that too because they needed to stay
For the
long
long
too
haul.
so that they could guide civilization and also guide the blending of the divine genetics, right?
Yeah.
um so in the center we have this temple. Now to the
Mm-hmm.
north of the temple we have the administrative buildings. You don't think
Okay.
about this when you're reading the biblical record of Eden, do you?
You
Right.
just, and that's it. I mean, and
Yeah.
this is something. Let me just point it out, Derek, because in our last podcast, I think it's important to point out a little bit of the immensity of God, and
Yes.
it's really important to move beyond what we know in what we've taught what we have not taught, but we had available. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
And the accounts that we had available to this, 2.0, it's going from from whoever is old as Derek and I are. I am you can remember, starting computers with MS-DOS, which is really, only people that were really into that really liked it, but I didn't. Nowadays, it's a whole different thing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
imagine that evolution, and when you really understand it, it really serves you in that perspective, and the understanding of God, it takes God into another dimension. So
Yeah.
please continue, Derek.
Yeah. God is so much more massive than we can even begin to imagine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the details and intricacies of the universal administration. That's what really
Yeah.
blows my mind, you know,
Yeah.
what's really
Yeah.
happening. And that we have even the audacity sometimes to think that, oh, we thought about the separation of powers as, just as something that just humans. No, no, no. We're bringing so much cosmic information, from the structures of the universe into our existence.
Yeah.
And that's the part of your will be done on heaven as on earth. And that is, and what in all the cultures presents as so is above, so is below. So this
That's
is
right.
this is really the exact point of the reflective influence that we have on our minds, on our spirit, on our matter, and everything from the order of the universe, the patterns
Yes.
in the order of the universe, and the unfoldment of the universe. And we don't even notice. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the point. I think if the more you notice and the more you can be conscious about it and contribute to it, which in the end is service. It's really simple,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It becomes really interesting. So please tell us
Well
more
said.
about.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
So we're trying to picture the garden. So we've got the temple in the middle, and
Uh
to the
huh.
north we have the administrative buildings.
Uh huh.
Um, to the south were um, homes and domiciles for the workers and their family, because there was a lot of workers involved in this, several thousand, building this over a period of 80 years. It took them to build what they did before Adam and Eve arrived.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to have homes. So that's where
Mm-hmm.
they were, to the south. And to the west was an area allotted for schools, because
Mm-hmm.
they were going to be bringing up a lot of children and training them and teaching them this new not advanced, but higher civilization, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the east were the homes built for Adam and Eve and their offspring.
Okay.
So that's the general layout of the garden. And a lot of the garden was also given over to just naturalness. Like, it was very botanical
It
and
was a
beautiful.
garden,
And
basically.
yeah, it was a garden.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So very, very botanical in that way. So, um, in terms of scope and scale, the architectural plans for the garden provided homes and abundant land for a population of 1 million people.
Okay.
So that should give you some scale. And I also want to say, when you're thinking about that, they aren't living in apartment buildings. They're talking abundant land and homes for 1 million people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that give you some idea of the size of this.
Which I think is very important, and I think it's pointed out is in some parts. You're more of it's your field of expertise, but in the Urantia book, it tells us, about the importance of not being all crammed up in just one space, and to have
Yeah.
this spacing in for the quieting and everything, right?
I know the part that you're thinking of, and
Yeah,
what they are talking about is for younger people, the movers and the shakers when you're young,
yeah,
living in multi-dwelling housing, like apartments and that kind of stuff, is fine. But once you're in a family and you're older and stuff like that, um, that kind of stuff is frowned upon.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you
Well,
gotta have abundant land and space for your family, right?
definitely,
So yeah,
definitely.
so I
Awesome,
know exactly
awesome.
what you're talking about there.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right, all right.
So
So tell us more.
yeah, so as I said, it took 80 years from when they started building to when Adam and Eve arrived. By time Adam and Eve arrived, by time they arrived, um, even after 80 years, the garden was only a quarter finished, based on the architectural plan.
Okay.
But in that 80 years, they had constructed thousands of miles of irrigation ditches, more than 12,000 miles of paved paths and roads. Like, just
Okay.
just get that in there. Get that in there. 12,000 miles of paved paths and roads. And that's only a quarter done.
Yeah.
and just over 5,000 brick buildings. So um, when they're building most of the houses and stuff like that, they're still using brick. So like we're talking mud brick probably still
Yeah.
at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. And the way that the houses were grouped is they were in clusters of no more than 7 buildings in one cluster and stuff like that. So that's
Okay.
something that will help you picture what it sort of looked like a bit more.
Okay.
So Adam and Eve, after 80 years of this, arrived.
Okay.
And I've got the exact year here from the year 2026, which is what it is now. They
Mm-hmm.
arrived 37,940 years ago.
Okay.
So that's when they arrived. And they arrived on this peninsula in the Garden of Eden to
Okay.
start their mission and try and to rescue us from the rebellion and the whole mess that all was, and to try and pick things up and move on and to try and get this biological kickstart going. So
Uh,
huge
uh,
mission.
uh, a
Huge
huge
mission.
mission, a
Yeah.
huge mission. So let's,
Yeah.
yeah, like we
Yeah.
said, this is important to put things into perspective that it wasn't an easy task, and that for what happened later, which is very interesting, and we're almost getting to that.
We'll get there.
So,
Yeah, we're
I
getting
mean,
there.
this is just
Yeah.
pre Adam and Eve. So what happened when they got here? Can we just
Yeah.
like
So
just into that?
basically, just talking a little bit about life in the garden, because it gives you some insight into kind of what civilization could have been
Yeah,
or where it would have been heading, because they're trying to build this up, and it's the divine ideal, I guess, is the
yeah,
best way to describe that, right? So in the East, where Adam and Eve and their children lived, until they were 16 years old, the kids went to school there in the East, right?
mm-hmm.
And the structure was that the older kids would teach the younger kids.
Okay,
And I love that because I've spent a lot of years in Japan,
yeah.
and the word for teacher in Japanese is sensei. And if you look at the characters that make that word up, it translates as one who is just a little bit ahead. And
Definitely.
and I love that, because that's all it is. That's what a teacher is. There's someone who is still on the path, hopefully, still learning, but they're a little bit ahead, and they can help the people behind them along. And I
I
love that.
like that, and and
Yeah.
and one of the things is that with my children, I they went to Montessori schools, and one of the things in the way that is structured, let's say in elementary, it's really two grades. It's not first, second, third. It's two grades,
Yeah.
and you have the first half and then the second half. And the idea is because right there, like that, you have the younger kids that are learning, and you have the teacher, the guide, and they learn in their own, and it's very individualized. Each one has, somebody is faster with math, somebody's faster with, so it's really you evolve as you need. But it's very important that you have these older kids, that they get it in a way that, and they can explain it to the younger kids in a way that maybe the teacher and the way they're approaching it couldn't do. So it's really important that that you have this, and it also helps you socialize, and it breaks the
Yes.
barriers. That's something that's
Yeah.
very interesting, with kids. A lot of the Montessori kids, you see how they relate within, the different ages and with the adults, and it's very different than other kids. Something that
Yeah.
when I wasn't a parent, I didn't even realize.
Yeah.
But as you go into that, and that's let me just point this out as a method. I always say it's not that the kids have to learn that way; it's that the parents have to learn that way, because you have to let them really grow in their own. So, please,
Parents are learning how to be parents while the kids are
that
learning how
oh,
to be.
oh that's
You know,
I don't know
don't
which
tell
one
the
is.
kids that.
Yeah, I don't know which one is a more yeah, challenging. Well, we know which one's more challenging
Yeah.
anyways, but
Yeah. Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's continue
So
with your story.
once they hit 16, they go, because I said in the western part of the peninsula it was schools, right? So once they
Mhm.
hit 16, they go to these schools in the western part, right?
Mhm.
And interesting that you said this just now, but the overarching purpose of the education in the western schools is socialization.
That's the foundation.
Yeah.
Your
And that's
compatriot Peterson is whom I really admire. Just that's his foundation. You know how you have
yeah,
to really be able to navigate through your society
yeah.
in and beyond. Yeah,
And that's we were talking before. That's the whole purpose of learning to, like, our whole education throughout our whole universe career is learning how to socialize with different groups and different individuals and work with them, and it's all socialization. So that
yeah.
just, yeah, amazing. So their schedule basically in the mornings, they would take classes and they'd do subjects and they'd actually learn and stuff. But in the afternoons, they would, all of the afternoons were devoted to competitive play.
Okay.
So contrast that to schools now. And when you think
I'm
you
gonna write
think play,
down.
well, you think play, they're just fooling around, right? But they're not. They're
No,
socializing.
no,
They're learning
no.
how to, especially with team sports, right? They're learning how to work in a
And
group.
actually, good that I brought Peterson up. But in his book, I think that's one of the main things that he talks about play. How play is how we
Yeah,
define meaning, how we understand and give meaning to things. So it's really important,
right.
you know. Imagine now. Well, I mean, that's the whole look at society. I mean, nobody knows what the heck is going on because they haven't been able to socialize. Because if you do not agree, and maybe somebody beats you or whatnot, I mean, look at it. And this is something, and I think I don't know if it was with you that I pointed this out. Something that not that I dislike, but I saw as a end of an age when about my summer camp in Texas is that, you know, there was a whole thing called the Uncle Bill's team that it was very aspirational, and you had to really acquire that, and you had to really look for it, and that really, you know, I wasn't able. I think I talked about this in another podcast, and I wasn't able to achieve that because of my ego, and that really broke me, and that experience of my life really is what molded me into what I am now. You know, it was crucial in my life. But
Yeah,
now it's not as an achievement thing. It's something that, you know, everybody's given to, and they are robbing a lot of the that experience. You know, I think it's very important that we do not rob people of that socializing, that achieving, and that, you know, because it builds character. It
yeah,
tempers your, you know, it destroys a little bit of your darker side or your ego, and it builds your character. It tempers your character. So it's very important, you know, the how, and this is important of the importance of the garden. You know, the model of socialization
yes,
beyond just the genetic. You know,
yes.
and then we're gonna go a little bit in a minute to the next part, which is what happened in the
What
downfall.
happened?
But
Yeah,
anything else that you want to point out? I mean, now that we're
yeah.
talking
There's
about
still a little bit more,
coming in,
but yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
You want to talk about it here, or you want to go further on?
No, this
This.
this is all part of this part. So we're still talking about the life in the garden a
All
little
right,
bit. So
go ahead.
so in the mornings they were doing studies. In the afternoons we had competitive play, and in the
Okay.
evenings they say it was devoted to more socialization and the cultivation of personal friendships and stuff like that. So it's just full on socialization, learning how to work with others, learning how to work with in groups, and that's everything. That's our whole, again, it's our whole universe career. So why don't we start
Yeah.
now?
Yeah.
So in terms of like what they were actually taught as subjects, I can list those off really quick.
Yeah.
They were taught, this is very similar to what was being taught in Dalmatia
Uh huh.
160,000 years before,
Uh-huh.
but it collapsed. So they were taught health and the care of the body, the
Mm-hmm.
golden rule, at least a form of the golden rule, you know, do
Mm-hmm.
unto others as they would, as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah.
Um, and that is the standard of social intercourse, right?
Yeah.
They were
Exactly.
taught the relation of individual rights to group rights
Okay.
and community
Okay.
obligations. So it's all socialization, even in the studies, right? They were taught history
Definitely.
and culture of the various Earth races, because that's important because they're going to be venturing outwards eventually. Methods of advancing and improving world trade, which is going to be incredibly important to them as they venture out again. They were
Mm-hmm.
taught coordination of conflicting duties and emotions, which is something I think we could all do well to learn.
That we would
At
need.
least
Yes,
I know I
definitely.
could. Yeah.
Yes.
And finally, the cultivation of play, humor, and competitive substitutes for physical fighting, which is again a socialization thing, really.
It's a socialization
Yeah.
thing again.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So that's what they would learn. That's their schooling. The average age of betrothal, because basically, it was important that they were building their population, right? Their
Yeah.
numbers, because that's what they had to do, at least in the beginning. So average age of betrothal was 18. And at 18, they would go into a 2-year period of instruction about marital responsibilities. Um, so that was 2 years. And that's something that we don't have, which we probably should. I think that would be enormously
It would solve
beneficial.
a lot of the
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
problems that we have in society and in couples and the
Yeah.
way that we interact. I mean, how
Yep.
important this is, the foundations, because we've really talked about the consequences of the big picture. So in civilization, in the universe, but personally as individuals, in relationships, personal relationships, the impact all of this situation had also upon us, right?
Yep. So at the end of that 2-year period, so they enter that at about 18, and then by 20 years old, they'd be eligible to get married.
Yeah.
And then once they get married, then they would either begin their careers or life work, or they would begin training for it.
Okay.
So that's what they would do. So that's basically life in the garden,
Okay.
broad strokes, obviously.
Yeah.
I think to finish this segment, I think it's important to sort of differentiate the goals of Dalmatia compared to the goals of Eden, though. So
Okay.
Dalmatia was constructed and designed to uplift civilization by providing a highly functioning example civilization in the city, which would attract people into it, right? So
Okay.
they would invite people in, say, "Hey, come spend some
Copy
time
our
in the city."
copy our model, let's
Yeah.
say.
Learn our ways of doing things and take them back with you to your tribes, and you'll be able to uplift your tribes that way. And that's how, so it was come stay with us, learn, and then go back. And that's how they
Yeah.
uplifted, right? Eden was also a highly functioning example of high civilization, but at least initially, they had to be preoccupied with building up their numbers
Okay.
and also training, with the studies and training them with world trade and all of these different things and the history of the different races so that they could not attract people into the garden so that Adam and Eve's children could go out. And what they were supposed to do once their numbers had hit,
Yeah, the
I
critical
can't
number.
it was either 500,000 or 1,000,000. I think it was 500,000 for us.
Okay.
Um, Once they hit that number, then they would actually go out and they would establish regional centers, which in my mind would act very similar to the way Dalmatia was functioning.
Yeah.
And people would be attracted to those centers, right? So how Eden functioned is it was a little bit more difficult to actually get into Eden. In order to get into Eden, you were welcome, but you had to be sponsored by a resident of the garden to actually come in.
Okay.
And
Okay.
in order to come in, even though you're sponsored, you had to be told of the plan and the purpose of the garden, and then you had to make a declaration of loyalty to that plan, and also a declaration of loyalty to the Universal Father.
Okay.
Now, why is
Interesting.
that important? That is because we live on a rebellion planet where
Okay.
everyone has rebelled against the Universal Father
You have to know
and the
their
divine plan
allegiance.
and right. So, in order to come in, you got to understand the plan, and you have to declare your loyalty to that plan and to the
Interesting.
unseen Father, Universal Father. So, a
And
little
let
bit
me
different.
how do you
Yeah.
get beyond the wild animals and all that? Is there a way that how did they
Yeah.
come
So
into? Because that's something that really struck
okay.
in my
So
mind.
the way I have it in my mind is there's 12 gates, right?
Yeah.
And so there's corresponding gates in the lower wall as well. But the paths between the two walls, I think there was some sort of wall or structure that was between them.
Okay.
But I think they were made of something that could be, if they were attacked and somebody breached the lower front wall,
Uh
they
huh.
could like pull a lever or something like that, and those walls between would sort of fall down, and then all of
Okay.
the
Yeah.
animals could
Like
come in.
yeah. Got it. Got it.
So yeah, so it's that kind of deal. So
That kind of deal.
so in normal peaceful times, you'd be protected going between. You'd probably have to be escorted by guards or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly. That's what I
Yeah.
thought.
But if
Or maybe
yeah,
like a road, like in Berlin there was like the road
yeah,
from east
checkpoints
to,
and all that
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, but in times of war or whatever, there'd be some sort of mechanism to get rid of
yeah,
those barriers so that the wild animals could do their thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. So,
Oh,
uh,
it's incredible. Yeah. Yeah.
interesting. So, are we done with the picture of the garden? Can we go into what happened with Adam and Eve? And
Let's do it.
let's do
Let's
it.
do it.
So,
Yeah.
let's see what happened and where I think we come in contact with the story in the Bible. So stay tuned and we'll find out. On the Divine Within podcast, we'll share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.